What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 87 of Nintendo Noise, Flip Screen Games weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. It feels like it's been a while since we've done one of these, just the two of us. Or am I
Yeah.
wrong?
Uh, yeah, because last week we had Max on. Week before that was me and Sierra. Then
No,
I
last
wasn't
week it
on for.
was you, me, and Sierra for the Mario movie, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and then the
They're all
week
bleeding
before was
together,
just me and
man.
Sierra. Yeah, it's been a while, just the two of us over on Nintendo Noise.
And what an episode for it to be just the two of us, because we've got our reactions to the latest Nintendo Indie World presentation, and then, of course, our thoughts on the final trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And I was not on the episode where you all got to react to the last trailer, so I'm excited to talk to you about it. I feel like you and I have not
Oh
really
yeah, the
talked about this
gameplay.
game in a long time.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to talk to you about that. Maybe we can dig into the 10 minutes of gameplay, which wasn't really 10 minutes of gameplay. It was 10 minutes of showing off Link's abilities. But yeah, we can touch on that as well.
Yeah, but we can touch on all of it, and we'll do a little hype check, a couple weeks
Yeah.
out, because it's probably going to be our last opportunity to talk about it before it drops. But yeah, so a lot of good stuff on the docket this week. So let's just jump right into it. Like I said at the top, we are just a few minutes now removed from the latest Nintendo Indie World presentation, and it is our first one of the year, I want to say, and our first one since last fall. Is that right?
Quite possibly, yeah, for an indie
I think
world.
that's right.
I think we've had something there, haven't we, this year from Nintendo?
Yeah, maybe. It's like I said, it's all feeling hazy. I got to be honest with you. Like trying to remember the last one, I just really could not. But um, I'm interested to chat with you about this one because I feel like we walked away from it feeling pretty differently. I thought this was a pretty middle of the road direct. I thought it was like
No, I mean,
very
it's not a direct. I
okay.
think that's probably why, like,
And whatever,
the
Indie
name.
World Showcase, however you want to.
I
I'm
think the
judging
name
it.
is I think the name is very important, though.
You're
Like, I
right.
do
You're
think
right.
that they use that to kinda show what level of clout it's gonna have.
You're definitely correct. I'm not judging it against any Nintendo Direct. I am judging it specifically against previous Indie World presentations. Because personally, I remember for the vast majority of the Switch's life cycle, right? It has been my destination for most indies, and these Indie World events have often been a really great opportunity to like learn about hot new indies that are like on the way that you want to look forward to, many of which were exclusive, right? And I feel like the last couple of these have really not inspired a lot for me. This one particularly, where it's like I feel like so much of what they had to show here was games we've already seen before, sequels to known quantities, DLC updates for games that are already out, and the stuff that was new or like new to me anyway. Like I gotta say, a lot of it feels a little trite. Like I am really sick of watching Nintendo events and then being like, how would you like another life sim farming shop management slice of like it's just like how
I mean,
many
I
of
love
these
those.
games
I play
I
so many of
also
those.
love those though, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, at a certain point, enough is enough, and maybe it is that it's just like we know how trends work, right? And like a bunch of these games get started on, and Mineko's Night Market, which they kicked off with. You and I have been talking about this game since 2018, right?
Yes, it's
And
been a long time. But I mean, 5 years is finally getting a release date on September 26th, but you're right, it's a long time coming. I think I came away from it happier than I did at the last one. The last one, I think I remember thinking that there was like 2 games I was excited about. We've got a pretty comprehensive list, and to be honest, we're touching on the majority of stuff that was announced here. But you're right, some of the games are quite similar. Some of them are kind of remixes on a theme to some extent. Like we've seen games similar to that before. They've mixed it up a little bit, maybe put in stuff from another genre, like we saw Plate Up, which is like, what if we did what's that game? The
it,
cooking
it's like
game?
it's like
Oh, what if we
overcooked.
did Overcooked, but we added like roguelike elements in and you like
Yeah,
manage
and
the environment rather
it's more
than
about like
yeah.
optimizing your environment than optimizing your teamwork, and like and the thing that I don't like is I hate coming into these with that attitude and being like, oh, this is just like this and this is just like I don't want to invalidate anybody's work, and it's not like
And honestly,
over.
I think some of those games can be fine. Look at Stardew Valley, it's Harvest Moon. But it's the
But
Harvest Moon that people wanted for so many years, and they added social elements to
I think
it.
that's the different. Well, they didn't. They had social elements in Harvest Moon. I don't
Not
want
to
you to get
that
attacked by the
extent,
Harvest
though.
Moon. Well, I
Not to the
mean,
extent level of extent that it's in Stardew, and he's still continually adding content. 1.6 is coming out
I,
in the
it's
next few
debatable, I
months.
guess, if you want to talk about the extent and which game we're talking about. I just don't want you to get eaten alive by the Harvest Moon fans. That was the
Fair
first
enough.
game I ever got married in
Yeah.
was in Harvest Moon. So I just want to be clear. But
Oh,
I think
I got married in The Sims.
I played Harvest Moon first.
There you go.
Um, but that's the thing, right? Is like it's not to say that any of these games are bad or that they look bad or anything like that. It's just like I
You're kind of
want
bored of them.
yeah, and I want to walk away from one of these presentations with at least one or two games where I'm like, that looks hot.
Well,
And
yeah, because I think some of these presentations have been really hot. This is where Untitled Goose Game was announced, for
right.
example. We're talking like that level of
When's the last
quality,
time a
that
game
level
like that was
of
announced at one of
engineering.
these events?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while, I guess, but I think Cult of the Lamb probably was the last one, and obviously saw some more Cult of the Lamb here that we'll talk about
Yeah.
in a little bit, but there are still some big games announced at these events.
I
I
just feel like
think
the last
Silksong
couple
was
have felt
announced at
soft.
one of these, or maybe that was maybe like promoted up to a full direct rather than an indie world at that point.
I can't remember.
Some of the
I
Shovel Knight stuff gets announced at these. Like, there is
yeah,
some big
right. It's like
titles that comes here. Like, that
and
new game from Yacht Club, I think, was announced here.
the
The
hollower.
one that yeah, that looks like a Game Boy game.
Yeah, and it's like that's the whole thing. Is like I want to walk away with at least one game like that. And I feel like all like not to say that there was nothing here, but I think the stuff that was most attractive to me was either stuff I already knew about or you know, oh, okay, like for example, Shadows Over Loathing, right? Is something where like that was a surprise drop. That was cool. It's also a sequel to Unknown Quantity. Like I have a really good idea of what that game is, and it's like I'm excited about that. I liked the first one, and I'm sure the second one will be cool and fun. But it's also not.
I don't know if that
It's
is
not
like a
fresh.
known
It's not
quantity,
new.
though, because it seems like they are doing different stuff with it. They didn't even call it a sequel. They said it's set in the West of Loathing
It's definitely
universe,
it's definitely
and it's
different.
different.
It's evolved, but like it's also very similar to the original in terms of like style and tone. You know,
Yeah.
gameplay innovation for sure, and like I'm not trying to discount
But
any
that's
of that.
similar to, like, Deltarune and Undertale, they're similar in style and theme, but they've got different gameplay elements and different vibes, and I think
Yeah,
you could maybe see something like that with Shadows over the Loathing
yeah,
versus
and
West of Loathing.
I'm sure you're right, but I guess it's like I guess that's where I get tripped up though, right? Because you brought up Stardew as like, oh, well, that was like a spiritual successor, right? But like Harvest Moon went away, and then Stardew was like, oh, whoa, like thank God, like water in a desert, right? Like this is what we've been waiting for, and someone's gonna give it to us. Whereas like I really liked West of Loathing, but it's also like I haven't been like sitting here vibrating for a sequel. It's like, oh, cool, a sequel. That's cool. I'm excited about that. But like, does that have the cachet of Celeste or some of the other types of games that we've seen at these presentations, or like even how I felt about seeing West of Loathing when I saw it for the first time, and I was like, oh, that's cute, that's novel. Like this is more of the
Mhm.
same, and that's not bad, but it's also not exciting. And I don't feel like this had that moment for me where it was like, oh man, like this is the next hot thing that I got to look out for.
That's fair. I think, though, maybe it's because some of the bigger indie players, like, I think it's Extremely OK Games now who made Celeste, and they're working on, I think it's Evercade or something like that. They're kind of doing their own presentations. Same with Eric Barone. We saw the Haunted Chocolatier. He just put a trailer up on YouTube. Maybe they don't need these presentations, or they go and do something like the other direct. The
The
What's it
wholesome
called?
direct.
Yeah, the Wholesome Direct.
Yeah,
They
I
go
mean,
because they're not all coming to Switch.
no,
Some of these games, they come to PC first and they announce them there,
or they
and I
come to
think
Game
that's why.
Pass.
Yeah, well, they come to Game Pass, and I think that's maybe why some of these games, which, Plate Up, for example, is a PC game. It's been out for, I think six months or so now. So it's a game that we've seen before, but it's getting a port over to Switch. The Sizzle Reel was pretty much entirely ports. In fact, I think it was entirely ports at the end. But it's still exciting if you've got a Switch and that's your kind of
Yeah.
main console for these indie games. Because I remember that's how we used to be, right? It was always like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, they're on PC, but I really want this to come to Switch because I want to play these kind of games handheld. I think some of these can still be exciting for people when they do come over. I went
Yeah.
away from this presentation a lot more hot on it than you did. I think there are some exciting games, and yes, the games that some of the games I'm excited about are sequels or kind of spin-offs to known quantities or from studios that we know. But I think that's okay because, you know, some of these games, the originals were phenomenal and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can work on next. But I do get your critique of some of these maybe themes becoming a little stale in the same way that we had that complaint at the Summer Game Fest last year that it was all
It's just like,
space
why are
zombie
there so
games.
many survival
Yeah.
sci-fi horror games at the same? Yeah, and it's just it's not to pick on any one of these games in particular, right? It's more just like I'm feeling over this trend and I'm ready for something that feels fresh again. And, maybe just like Nintendo doesn't have it right now, right? Because there are all these other avenues that indies have to talk about. And like Switch used to be the de facto, like if you're an indie and you want attention, this is where you're gonna go. You have more options than you used to, I guess, between your game passes and now that we are on Steam Deck, we're maybe more dialed into that community anyway, and all that. But as much as I think overall this felt a little flat for me, there are definitely some really good like standout games here, I think. Particularly depending on, what your genre tastes are. Um I I don't want to go through like every single announcement. So, I know we've already touched on a couple of them. So, why don't we just like get into what the games that we walked away from with really high, like good, solid impressions for? Why don't you start? Like, what was your standout?
I think for me, Monaco's Night Market right at the top. The fact that we saw a little bit more of the story on it, I kind of have a bit of better grasp on what it is, and the fact that it's finally coming on September 26th, 5 years, maybe even 6 years after we first saw it. I still love the visual style of it. Maybe the game's not gonna land in the same way that Sports Story didn't land, right? Because that was another game that I was really hyped for a good number of years following on from Golf Story.
Man, that's another example. That was a heck of a blunder, right? Like how
Yeah.
much Golf Story was beloved at launch, and for Sports Story to just like go like fumble the bag right after like all these showings and us being so excited about it.
Yeah, so
It
much
was a
so I didn't even
surprising
bother
one.
picking it up after the
Me
reviews
neither.
dropped. I was just like, there's no point. I'm gonna I'll walk away having loved Golf Story, and I'll live with that, but it's a real shame that that didn't land, and I could see the same thing happening with Mineko's Night Market, but I'm hopeful that y it's gotta have been delayed, right? I'm hopeful that these delays have meant that they've gone away and spent time and polished it up and have come
Yeah.
away with a really great game because it looks phenomenal, and I'm looking forward to playing that one.
I hope it hits because like I said, I like this kind of game. Like I know I'm like I was down on it in general at the top, but I think it's just because there's been so many good ones in recent memory that like I just don't have any interest in playing one that's like okay. Like there are certain
Which ones have you
genres.
played though, like, lately that have really caught you?
I mean, that's the thing is there hasn't been a new one that's caught me in a while, right? I think the
There was
last
that
game like
Harvestella.
this.
I remember trying the demo for that.
Yeah, and it's like that was one that I was interested in, but it just didn't quite click, it didn't quite hit me the way that I wanted it to. And I think like really it's been since I want to say Animal Crossing where like I really really dove into one of these games and committed to it. I've started plenty of games like this, right? And not even just slice of life or like management style like that broader kind of like sim category, right? Like I've started a few games of that ilk in recent memory of the last year or two since Animal Crossing and like none of them have like hit the way I
Yeah.
want them to. And I like that this is more oriented. I like the art style. Obviously I'm a cat guy, so I'm like into that element.
Yeah, it reminded me more of, like, Night in the Woods with then some,
Yeah.
like, Stardewy style elements.
And it's
There
like,
are
I
s and if it is that, I think for me, that's probably gonna be enough. I think that was the same as the game that Chewy kept trying to get us to play, Ooblets, and how and it wasn't necessarily what I expected it to be, which is just this, like, perpetual, never-ending game like Stardew, that it does have a bit of a story to it, and I like the
yeah,
fact that Mineko's Night Market seems to have the same thing. Um I don't know. I'm playing Stardew Valley at the moment. I'm obsessed with it again since the 1.5 update. They've added so much more content there. It's going to be difficult for me to dive in as deep on another game like that. And for me, I don't think Animal Crossing is even on the same level as like a Stardew Valley. They're very different games. Like Stardew Valley is very much the focus is on making money and farming and kind
yeah.
of running a business. And I like that side of things. And then there are the social elements. It always seems like though for you, Pete, that you enjoy slice of life, but it's got to be in a game with something else. I'm thinking like a Persona 5 or a Fire Emblem, where it has
Right.
that social element and that slice of life, but it's got to be tied with something else. And
Or
maybe
or
Mineko's
like,
Night Market does that for you.
yeah, because like, if it has a good story, that'll be enough, right? That'll be the thing that pulls me along. It's like, I think you're right. I think when there are games of that style and the point of it is just like, you just do this forever, and it's like, okay, but like, how zoomed out am I? Because like, what was that game that you and Chewy played, where it was like, there was like a dungeon crawling element, I think, and then it was this town sim, and you had to place things in specific places, and it would be like, oh, I want to live next to this, but not too close to
Yeah.
this thing. Do you remember the game I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think it was Littlewood
Tinykin?
was the
No,
game.
that was the Pikmin one. Littlewood, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
Tinykin's also great, but Littlewood, there's no like dungeon crawling element in there. The one that's the dungeon crawler is where you run the shop,
Moonlighter,
Moon
which also I loved,
Moonlighter,
right? And
yeah.
like, that's again, you can see where that, right? Okay, cool. Like, there's this shop element, then there's also this like roguelite thing attached to it. That hit for me. With Persona, there's the slice of life stuff, and then there's obviously like the JRPG and the narrative and like all these other things to pull you through. Um, and like, I can get into games like that. Like, I really loved like, I like Sim City style games. Like, I like Tropico and like, like the tycoon type games and things like that. But to me, those are so much more gameplay oriented that like they work for me. And I feel like there's some where it's like, oh, it's like there's a social sim element, but it's not deep enough for me to like or care about any of the characters. So I'm like, this isn't really that satisfying. And then it's like it's meshed with this gameplay thing, but it's like, okay, but is this as deep as it is in like something like Tropico or SimCity or City Skylines or whatever, right? Like, and it's got to be either light enough on that stuff and have another hook, like something like Cult of the Lamb, or it needs to be like very, very mechanically
Yeah,
like
see, Cult of the
deep.
Lamb for me was not enough. It was too light on it, and to the point where I just felt like a lot of that stuff didn't really matter. Like I could have carried on doing the dungeon crawling and not bothered going back to the village, and it would have all been fine when I came out the end anyway. You're just
I I
nagging
get
at me
that.
to go back for no reason.
See,
So
I liked the interplay of those things. Like, I liked how the focus of the game was more the roguelite, and then it's like, okay, like I take the winnings from that and then I can invest them to get more powerful. And like there was that clear sense of progression, right? And it wasn't about the social element. It wasn't about like having a relationship with anybody in my town or anything like that. They're just like livestock. And that to me felt like more like, okay, like that's more like a Sim City. That's more like a Tropico. That's more like, like the base management in Fallout 4, right? Where it's like it's a percentage of a number of like people are happy or they're not. Not like, oh, my neighbor in Stardew, like I'm trying to romance them. So I need to, like that has such a different type of gameplay. And like for me, for those, I need to really care about the characters. I need to have investment in the story and who they are and what their,
oh yeah,
needs are and all that.
I get that. The run I'm doing on Stardew Valley at the moment is entirely I'm just making as much money as I can, and I don't give a shit about any of the people, and I'm not doing any of the
Yeah.
social stuff. So, you
See,
can
that's the thing
play
is
that.
I
I
think
like
that
that you
game
can just
works.
ignore that.
That game works though because both things are so well developed. Like the
Yeah,
farming element of if that was all that there was to the game, it would still be good, right? The social stuff, if that was all there was to the game, it would still be good. But it's not. It's both of them, and that's why it's great. And
yeah.
that's what I'm looking for. And like I think Mineko's looks like it has the potential to have that juice for me. I think my worry is I remember being so interested in this game in like 2018 because I really wanted Animal Crossing and it wasn't out yet. Whereas now it's like, oh, I had that itch scratched. Like, is that, is that really what I'm in the mood for right now? I hope so.
Just have to wait and see. I mean, the problem is what else is coming out in September as to whether you wanna bite on this at launch or you go and play Baldur's Gate 3, which is or, Starfield, which is also out in
Yeah.
September, and you probably pick one of those up rather than this. But this could be that nice little palate cleanser between those big
Mm-hmm.
games, where
Exactly.
at night you're just like, "Oh, let's go do a couple of days in Monaco's night market and
Wind down with it.
craft some stuff and play with some cats and chill
I could
out," you
also
know?
easily see this being one of those games where it's like December hits and it's like, okay, like all the big releases are done. Like, what are the indies that I missed that I want to double back on? Let me spend a weekend with Mineko and get through that. So yeah, I'm my eyes on it for sure. But I worry that it's going to be one of those games that I was interested in that gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm looking. Monaco's night market first joined Twitter in April 2015, and that was when they first posted about the game.
Yeah. So
So it's
we've been
been
like
coming for a
you and I
very long time.
remember this being one of the first games when we first started working together at Loot Pots that you were like, "Oh, I'm interested in this game. You should check this out." So
Yeah,
like
because they look really cool. I was always in with that cozy vibe.
it just speaks to how long we've been excited for this game though, right? Like we've
Yeah.
been excitedly covering it for like 5 years and it's like at some point it's like can you maintain that hype, And I don't know. Like, that's the thing. If it comes out and everyone's like, "Oh, it's a 9, it's a 10, it's one of the best indie games of the year," I'm gonna get re-excited. I'm gonna be right back in there. But if it's like more like, "Oh, the high range is like an 8," and it's like, a lot of people think it's like a 7.5, I'm gonna be like, "Oh, okay, 5 years for that? I don't know. Do I need to play it?" Like, I don't know. And like I don't want to feel that way, but I don't necessarily have that pull that I had in 2018 and 2019.
Mhm.
So the next one I wanted to talk about specifically because this is a sequel to another very old game that I remember you talking to me about, which was My Time at Sandrock, which is a sequel to My Time at Portia, which is actually I think the first game that you reviewed when we worked at Loot Pots, right?
Not the first. I did a couple prior. I'm looking back now. I did like 4 or 5 prior to this, but, yeah, I was not so hot on, my time at Porsche
I remember
until
you had
I
been
really
really
got
excited
into
for
it.
it, and then when you got your
Yeah.
hands on it, it didn't click the way you wanted it to.
I think it was too ambitious and wasn't polished enough, and, like, the UI felt clumsy in places. Um, but I did enjoy my time with it. It really filled that spot when I finished, playing Stardew Valley. It was like, "Oh, what's the next kind of game like this that I'm gonna jump on?" And my time at Porsche was that one. Um
How do you feel about Sandrock? Like, is this something that are you like interested in giving them another at bat, or was like the things about the game that didn't work for you so high that you're kind of like, I don't know.
I think it was just lack of polish more than anything that frustrated me in that game, and that could have just been because the Switch couldn't handle it. I don't know why, but this game didn't look very polished when they showed it in the presentation. I wasn't particularly fond of the art style again.
Has kind of like a mobile style to it.
Yeah. So I think this will probably be one I pass on, but I think if you enjoyed my time at Porsche or you like this style game, it's probably one to check out.
It is in early
Uh,
access right now on Steam, and its reviews are overwhelmingly positive. 80% of the user reviews are positive, so
yeah, well
could be one to
there
watch
you go.
out
I mean,
for.
I think then if you're into this kind of game, it's one to pick up. But I'm not looking for another one, and I think if I'm going to play another game that is about crafting and collecting things and building things this year, it's probably going to be Monaco's.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think the thing about it that I did think was interesting was the desert angle is interesting. Like I know that they had said that like they had visited like the Gobi Desert, I think it was, and that they were like inspired by the way that people like have adapted to living in that super harsh climate. And I that's something I didn't really think about where like a lot of these town builder like sim type games or whatever um like, aren't like that. Like, they're not in a super harsh environment, and, like, I was thinking, like, that is kind of interesting. Like, it doesn't necessarily seem like this game is going to go that route in terms of, like, flirting with survival in a serious way, but I was thinking, like, that's kind of an interesting wrinkle. I feel like that's a way that you could maybe make that genre feel more fresh again, is, like, having it be in, like, a super resource limited space rather than, like, you're on this island with like unlimited bountiful resources. Like, what do you want to turn it into? Like, I kind of like the idea
Yeah.
of it being like a little bit like almost like was it State of Decay? I think was that zombie game from Xbox. And like that was a big part of that was like, oh, you need to like loot and have and bring resources back to feed people. And if you want to bring more people into your community, like you need to have more rations. And like you were
Well,
constantly
yeah, and
having to
that's I mean,
play with
and
that.
that's, like, taken from Rust, right? Where,
Yeah.
I mean,
Or
that's
that
basically that
style.
entire game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like
I
imagine
don't
that in a
think my
town
time at
builder.
Sandrock is that at all. I don't think it's that at all. I think
No.
it looks like there's gonna be similar areas like there were in Portia where you can go and it's like mining and it's like plentiful resources and things like that. It looks like they've totally revamped the UI and have somewhat ripped off um, the UI from Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo, which is no bad thing because the UI for selecting things in that game is great. And my time at Porsche did not have a great interface for selecting and placing items. So looks like they've taken on some of the criticisms and have adapted it and moved forward with it, which is always good to see. But yeah, not going to be one that I pick up on day one.
So another one that you did put on the list is Quilts and Cats of Calico, which is, obviously we're both cat boys, so there's that element of it, but it's an adaptation of a indie board game that you said had like somewhere in the high 80s on you give me the breakdown here. What's the
Yeah,
deal?
it's got 8 out of 10 on Board Game Geek. It's an adaptation of the puzzle board game, which is like it's more like a strategy board game that I would say, where you're trying to get the most number of cats to go on your board, from what I can remember. I've been wanting to pick up a copy of Calico for a while. It's nice to see that there is a digital version coming, which looks like it's been adapted somewhat. And there's like a solo mode as well, which is always nice. So you can just play alone, or you'll be able to play online with AI. Presumably, there's going to be local play as well. I don't think they mentioned that in the presentation. Um, but this is I think a cute looking game, and the internet loves cats. I was surprised that you weren't as into it
I
as I
just
was.
I don't know, like the gameplay of it just didn't look very interesting, and I think that's probably more the fact that like it's not I think it's not usually easy to convey why board games are fun by looking at them, right? Like
No, it's not.
so I think my kind of like reaction to it was more just like, okay, like, like what even is this? Like, what is the gameplay here? And like they explain that it's like you have your part of the quilt and you're dropping patterns, and like certain cats have like a preference for those patterns, and like that's I guess how you get the cats on your part of the quilt, and like that's the gameplay of it. But that's a thing where it's like, okay, like mechanically, I can I can wrap my head around that, but I don't understand why that's fun. And like looking at it, it didn't have
It's
a
like a puzzle strategy game, so it's like the strategy of what's the other player gonna do, what pieces might they be
yeah,
holding, what patterns are they going for versus
which
what
that
patterns
sounds
am I
fun.
gonna put down, and they've just put then like a quilt and a cat mechanic on top of it. I think it's a cool take on a strategy game. It's interesting that there's only one board on this version, whereas in the board game version, everyone gets their own quilt, and there's like pieces in the middle of the table. It looks like you just
Yeah,
get
that's
a
interesting.
single board for everyone, and everyone's playing on the same one,
I wonder how that works.
which is an interesting twist on it. So I think there's something. Even if you've played Calico, there's probably a reason to pick up the digital version.
Cool. So this is, I think, for me, one of the big highlights. Even though I'm not like super into this style of game, I just think this game looked really good. Is Rift of the Necrodancer, which is, the latest. They called it a spinoff of Crypt of the Necrodancer, but obviously, the latest from that same team. And rather than it being the kind of like overworld like dungeon crawler that we're used to. It's more of a boss rush mode where it to me it looks very reminiscent of like a Guitar Hero or like a Dance Dance Revolution, but like that's the RPG combat is like enemies are coming down, like a guitar neck at you, and you are hitting them the way you'd hit notes in like Guitar Hero, and if you miss it, then they deal damage to you. Which yeah, is really interesting. Like I, rhythm games hit or miss for me, right? I didn't like Crypt of the Necrodancer. Actually, I guess I shouldn't even say that. I didn't play the original. I played the Hyrule spin-off. What was that one called? The Zelda one.
Cadence of Hyrule.
Cadence of Hyrule, right? I tried that and it just didn't click for me. I find that like rhythm games are not they just often don't work for me because there's a certain amount of latency between the control and the music and like having that background as like a drummer and like hearing an internal metronome. It's like if I'm hitting it with the metronome and it's not landing that way in the game, I get very frustrated because it's like it's just not optimized well. And it's like some games do it better than
You played
others,
Hi-Fi Rush yet?
and
I'm
I
so
really like it.
curious. As
I really like it.
Yeah.
And I haven't finished it yet. I've only played the first 2, 3 levels maybe, but I love that game. And that is one of the first ones I think aside from like Guitar Hero that really works for me.
Yeah,
Just
and I
because
think that's
it's
because everything in the world is moving and bopping, and it's in the beat, and there's the
the
visual
visual
cues and the
cues.
music cues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like this is gonna have a lot more visual cues than something like Cadence of Hyrule, because obviously you have that guitar neck with the enemies coming down, and you can
Yeah.
see when they land on the actual piece, so you can kind of
Which makes me think
figure
I
it
might
out as
like it.
well.
'Cause I liked Guitar
Yeah.
Hero. So I'm like, maybe this'll work for me. And also I like that it has like it seems like there's a story, right? Like they like kind of leaned into this idea that like she knows the people that she's battling and that there's like, like there's multiple
Well, I
playable
think
characters and
they're all from, Crypt of the Necrodancer, and, like, I think in that game, she, like, banishes them off into a rift, and now they're all kind of pouring out of it again,
oh, okay. Okay.
and so that's why it's like a spin-off. It
And it's
says
also
in
just
the
like a
description she's got to repair the rifts that have torn her life apart, do rhythmic battle via rift mode, but there's also, mini game mode, boss battles mode, obviously, there's the new soundtrack. Um, so it looks like this because did you see in the presentation there's like that mode where they're all like doing yoga and you've got to do the different poses and things as
yeah,
well. Like
and
there's all those
they
little mini games that you can play
I think they
outside
mentioned that
of
there
the
were
Rift
multiple
mode.
playable characters and that each one had a different game, right? It's like I think the character we saw, like there was like the yoga thing, but then there was like somebody like making a burger and like kind of these other little side rhythm games that I guess you can do between the boss battles and everything as well.
Yeah, which I thought looked cool.
I,
I
it looks
absolutely
good.
loved Cadence of Hyrule, and I was hoping that they would be working on something new. So I think I may end up checking this one out.
I think I might too. And I might be disappointed, but like I want to give it a shot. I really like what Brace Yourselves games is like. I like their vibe, and even though like none of their games have really hit for me, like they're one of those studios. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like where you're like, fuck, like I don't get this, but I like what you're doing. Like it's not for me, but I want it to be. I want to champion it.
Oh,
I
yeah. Is
think
that
what
you
they're
with
doing is so
every
cool.
Cells game?
Yeah, I guess. So then we got into kind of a rock block of DLC updates for a bunch of games. There were two that kind of stuck out to me just because like I've played the original games and enjoyed them quite a bit. Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon is getting another puzzler pack, and it's got like a bunch of new characters, some new modes and stuff. I liked that game fine. It didn't light me on fire, but the fact that it's getting like a big, substantial free update, very cool, very in line with how Yacht Club likes to
I
operate.
don't know how that company makes money. I really don't, not 'cause, like, they just give everything away for free.
I think it's just because they like it's like Stardew in that way where it's like Shovel Knight just continues to sell and it's like they have gradually made it more expensive, but like if you were somebody if you ride or die with them, if you buy a game when it comes out and it's $10 or $20, like they've given me what, 4 fucking free campaigns of stuff with Shovel
I
Knight
know, it's
and then a whole
mental.
spin-off game.
Yeah,
Shovel
it's
Knight
absolutely
Showdown was awesome.
crazy. That, like,
Yeah, they're
treasure
great.
trove was, like, such a good deal.
It still is. Now, even at full price, it's still a good deal. You get so much content.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
I think they
Uh,
just it just goes to show, right? Like it's like I think it's the same reason that that CD Projekt Red was able to give away 2 DLCs for The Witcher 3. It's like if you make a game that absolutely slaps and then you give away
well, and
content,
then they just
people
did
show up.
the free next gen update, which had, like, ray tracing and stuff, like, they're still continually adding things to that game as well.
Yeah, like how many like a decade later almost.
Yeah.
Not quite, but close, closer to a decade than 5 years. So yeah, it's very cool. I'm a big Yacht Club fan, and I love Shovel Knight. So, very very cool to see some more content come to that one. And then, Cult of the Lamb's Relic of the Old Faith, is the free update coming to Cult of the Lamb, which adds a bunch of content as well. Um, there's like some new like buildings, some new like villagers that you can add, and some changes to like there's like remixed boss fights, and just like a ton of additional content. So I think
Yeah,
if
there's, like, a
you
bunch of new modes they spoke about, like, once you finish the
there's like
game,
a
there's this
permadeath
permadeath
mode,
mode,
and
a gauntlet mode, like a boss rush mode, like, there's a load of things that you can do in there, which
yeah.
is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Cult of the Lamb. I know, like you said earlier, it didn't really click for you last year, but it was on my list for Game of the Year. It was my favorite indie that I played last year, and I think if you are like me and you played it last year and you enjoyed it and you want an excuse to go back, I think there's quite a bit here to kind of like encourage another run or to come back and close things out if you didn't or whatever. But I also think it's one of those cool updates that if you're a new player and you're coming in and like you're just gonna get what twice as much, an extra third's worth of content than
Yeah.
from what people enjoyed from what was already a really good and really robust game. So yeah, this is just good news, good win. Super cool to see a game that I thought was so special continue to make waves and get attention. All right, now you go, Steve.
Right. So I was excited about a few other games. Animal Well, which I specifically wanted to call out because it's from Donkey's new
Big
publishing
mode.
house, Big Mode. I
Yeah, it
think
was
it's his
his
first
publisher.
game, right?
It is, I think. I don't because I if I recall when they made the announcement, I don't think they announced any games
No, he was like,
alongside it.
"Pitch me your games. I wanna see what games you're making, and then I'm gonna pick some to publish." And Animal Well seemingly is the first one, so it's nice to see. I thought this game looked really interesting. It's
I
like a
thought this was the
labyrinth
best
game.
looking new, like
Me
actually
too.
new game. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I thought
like
this looked so cool.
it's far away. It's, somewhat an unknown quantity. I definitely don't want to
Don't wanna dunk
like
on Donkey.
no, no, it's like and I think enough people did, right? Like I think it's fair to say that his argument of like, well, I know good games, so I could be a video game publisher is like, yeah, there was a reason people razzed him for that. But I mean, hey, this game looks good. So I'm ready for him to put his money where his mouth is, you know? I
Yeah.
think this game looks genuinely interesting. Like it looks like fresh and like a different kind of take on like the Metroidvania exploring puzzle solving type thing. And also I think it's beautiful. It's got a really great art style. I really like its use of like scan lines to kind of give like an old school feel. But obviously with like much more advanced modern animation. The color palette is really nice. It's got like a cool like vaporwave, moody kind of look to it. I think this game looks really interesting. I mean, how will it feel to actually get hands on it? Could this be a thing like Eastward where we're gassing it up for a long time and it comes out and we don't really give it the time of day or it doesn't connect the way you thought it would? Maybe, but for a first impression, I thought it looked pretty solid.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, it looks like it's a twist on the kind of Metroidvania typical classic gameplay that we know, and they've added in like horror elements and puzzle elements, and it's like you can go anywhere, but then you're gonna have to double back on yourself once you figure out how to solve the puzzles. So it looks really interesting. I'm reading through some of the stuff on the press release that Big Mode put out, and there's like a custom engine and renderer built specifically for pixel art that they've put together. So
I like that.
seemingly an impressive, like an impressive ambitious game for a single person to build because it looks like it's just Billy Basso who
Yeah, he
was in the
mentioned in the
presentation that
yeah, he said that he made everything. It's like a totally a one-person project.
yeah, which I always love. I'm always in complete awe that some one person can make all of it, the music, the visuals, the gameplay, the story, like
Especially
everything.
when it actually looks good like that, right? Where you're like, "Oh, really?
Yeah,
Like, you're that good at all those things?" Because like, that's how I feel about Stardew. Like, when I learned that that was one person, I'm like, "What? Like, really? Like, you're that good at composing pixel art and coding? Like, that seems unlikely," you know?
and music, like the music in that game is
That's
phenomenal.
why I
It's
s
like,
yeah, I
what are
said
you
composing.
doing? Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Like,
wow.
"What?" It's like,
Yeah.
why are you this good at all of this?" Whatever. God bless you. We love an auteur when they're not a psychopath. Um the only other game that stood out to me that I wanted to call out was Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals. Obviously, it's a game we've seen a bunch of times already and everything. Like, it's not a new thing, but I really loved the original Oxenfree. I've been really looking forward to what Night School was going to do next. I'm surprised that this is like a direct sequel. That it's like it's 5 years later. It's like picking up from that story and kind of continuing what was. I didn't get the impression that that was a game that needed like a true sequel, which makes me interested because it's like, oh, then they must have more to say about the lore and kind of like the supernatural stuff that they had set up in the original. So, yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah, I thought the new like walkie-talkie thing they had where you can like
very interesting.
talk to nearby people seemed really cool as well.
I love the dialogue system in that game, and like you make choices and it influences like how the story progresses, but it happens in this very like naturalistic kind of way. I bet that seems like a very interesting addition to that to have like the walkie-talkie and that be able to have more conversations that will like impact the world and stuff is very cool. Yeah, I mean, this is just like the first one was such a slam dunk for me, and I am excited to replay it. I haven't played it since it came out, and given that this is like directly connected, I do want to boot it up again and kind of refresh my memory. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
super looking forward to this one.
I think it's so interesting. I still can't figure out Netflix's strategy with this. Did they buy them because they just wanted the Oxenfree
IP.
IP for like a TV show? And like
I
this was the
mean,
cheapest way to do it because and they were already making the game anyway because they'd already announced it, so why not just put it out anyway? Or maybe this is part of their next step because we saw this week and we didn't speak about on the Flip Screen Games podcast, but there was like a former director over at Bungie who's now joined Netflix and is working on like a new AAA game. And
yeah.
how does that tie into your Netflix subscription, or does it at all? Is this just you buy these games and they just become now a
I mean,
publisher because they've got all this cash?
they've published video games before, right? Like there was like that Stranger Things game and everything. So it's like they've done it, and like that was on Switch, and Netflix is still not on Switch. So there'll be Netflix products on Switch without Netflix on Switch. So it's like, I don't know. Like, could you get to the point where, as part of your Netflix subscription, you can like download a AAA game and play it off your TV or something like that? Like, probably. Like, I think at some point that'll probably be where they go. But I wouldn't be surprised if, at least in the interim, that like they will release their games on other platforms and that they'll just be like, yeah, like we also publish games now and we are building a library of IP, in the same way like this is something I wouldn't expect you to know, but they acquired Millar World, which is Mark Millar, very very prolific comic book creator, and they did that show what is it? Jupiter Circle, or Jupiter's Ascension. I forget which one it is because there's three series and they all have Jupiter in the name. But that was one of his IP that they adapted into a show, right? And they also publish his comics now. So like any of the Millar World comics that get published, Netflix is part of that partnership. Like they sometimes they partner with another publisher, but like they're still putting out books in stores. You can buy them online, all that stuff. That obviously doesn't relate to their business. They don't have like a comic streaming platform or anything like that, but they own that IP and it's
But there's
valuable
got
for
to be
them to be
some
able to
that,
leverage it.
yeah, they bought it for the IP, and that's what I mean. Did they buy Night School just because Oxenfree was such a cool IP and they could see doing something with that, or are they
I
actually interested in making games, which it seems like they maybe are with the news
I think it's
from the
both.
Bungie director?
I think it's both. I think that like are interested in acquiring the IP so that they can leverage it, for movies or TV shows or whatever. But I also think that like when you think about Netflix getting into video games, I think Night School feels like a natural partner, right? Because like what is Netflix doesn't know about making games, but what they do know is about like creating narratives and developing IP. And like Night School, that's what they make. They make narrative games. The idea that like that would be a good fit on Netflix of like, oh yeah, you want to get into the interactive storytelling side of things, like rather than, like maybe focusing on like games that are super mechanics oriented or multiplayer oriented or whatever, right? Like something that's not about telling a story that you can then turn into a TV show or a movie or whatever later on.
Although
That's my thought.
I was having a quick look, and you do get Oxenfree as part of your Netflix subscription on
You do?
mobile. So you also get another one of our favorite games, 12 Minutes. So there's another potentially
They they put out that
potential.
other They put out that other game too, though. It's Before Your Eyes. I haven't gotten to play it yet, but it just came out on PSVR 2, and like that's another experimental narrative indie game where like the whole mechanic is you look at your webcam or like your the eye tracking on your headset or whatever, and whenever you close your eyes, like whenever you blink, that's how the story moves forward, and that's the only way you interact with the game. Like
Is
I
that a
can see
Netflix
them.
game? That's
It
Netflix
is.
published?
You can play it on your phone or your tablet
Interesting.
through Netflix.
Interesting.
It's also available on Steam and PlayStation. But yeah, it's so the idea that they want to like continue to go down that route and do more like experimental narrative stuff and makes sense to me.
Yeah, I like that. It's very Black Mirror.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's cool. And like they did that whole Bandersnatch like interact,
Bandersnatch thing,
it's
yeah.
like I don't know, like uh, they're not a company I thought made sense to get into games, but like if they're going to commit to it and be like, no, this is like our weird little niche. We're going to make like Telltale style, story driven, and then experimental stuff and,
But it
whatever.
seems like that's not
Eh,
just what it's gonna be though. Like AAA is not that, I don't think. I'm very interested to see
Yeah.
where they
And
go.
the
This
AAA
is a
wrinkle of it
conversation.
is that's like a way
Yeah.
deeper thing. Is like, what does that mean? But
Yeah, and
who,
it's someone who worked on Halo and Destiny, so it's probably not this style of game.
no, but
Who knows?
it also could be, right? Because it's like there are a lot of people that come from I was in AAA for like 10 years and then I started an indie studio and I make this totally different kind of game. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
you're right.
I don't know. It's interesting though. We'll see. I mean, Lord knows. Like, are they gonna really stick around and do something here? Or are they gonna go the way of like Google or what we think will happen with Amazon or whatever, where they're like, whatever, not worth it. I don't
I
know.
think they stick around because they kind of have to, because their business, although their business is seemingly going in the opposite direction now. Did you see that they now make more money from the ad-supported tier than all of their other tiers combined?
I
So,
mean, that makes
seems like
sense.
that's probably the route going forwards. But they've always said that they're not competing just with these other platforms. They're competing with anything that entertains people, and that's why they got into video games. And I think
Yeah.
they need to continue down this route if they want to keep people coming back to Netflix and keep those like ten to $15 a month coming in.
I mean, it's a good differentiator. It makes them stand out from their competition, in a way that's
I mean, that
interesting and
competition's saying Amazon and Apple, and Apple's got Apple Arcade, and you get that as part of your like Apple One subscription, and Amazon's got now Luna, and you
right.
get it as like part of Prime. So it seems like they're all kind of doing it. Netflix is
Yeah,
just, we know
but then
Netflix, the name is movies and TV,
sure.
and it feels different.
But I think of like you think of like the other I think the two big players in the streaming space that aren't them are Disney and HBO Discovery, whatever the fuck that's
It's just
called now.
Max now. It's just called Max now.
Right, but I meant like the parent company. I can't remember if they're
Yeah.
whatever, but
Warner, isn't it? Are they not Warner?
is it Warner Discovery or did Discovery get Zoom? I don't remember.
I genuinely no idea at this point.
Because they love to do that. They love to buy a company that's way less valuable than them and then add them to their name. Like remember AOL
Yeah, yeah,
Time
like
Warner?
AOL.
That was a whole
AOL was worth a lot more than them
yeah,
for
at
a
the
while.
time. At the time it was. But IP or what's valuable? What IP does Discovery own? Shark Week? Great. Good job.
They've
Good use of
they've
your
got
money.
that they've got that truckers show that my partner watches, Ice Road Truckers. You know,
Wow.
that's a big game,
Great.
a
Thank
big
God.
big
Thank God they
TV
spent all
show,
that money
yeah.
on canceled all those cartoons so they could buy that
And
shit.
is Storage Wars on Discovery? I like watching that. That's
It
good.
might be. It might be. Well, guess what? It's coming to Max, baby. Get ready. Anyway, so I think despite my bit of poopy pants energy at the beginning of this episode, there's some good stuff here. There's some games I'm looking forward to. you know? I think in general, this year is just so stacked too that I think that also probably influences my feelings a little bit where it's like, I think you gotta be a hot game to come out this year, otherwise you should delay yourself because the calendar this year is aggressive.
Yeah. Poor Horizon coming out with the DLC mere weeks before Tears of the Kingdom. What is wrong with
It
them?
can't catch a break. It can't catch a break, Steve. Whatever. I'll play it and love it. Don't worry. Me and your dad will champion it. All right. So we ended up going a little longer on that than I thought we would, but that's all right. We're going to get into the Zelda conversation in just a second here. But let me remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackigo, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. All the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go and show your support just like they did to become a Patreon producer, you could get your name right on the air. You could get the show early. You could get a whole bunch of good perks and goodies. But if you don't have any money for us, no big deal. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all of the ways that you can get involved that don't cost you a pretty penny. You can write into the show for our question block segment. You can come check out links to our other shows. You can, wherever you want to get us, right? Come join the Discord, keep the conversation rolling between episodes. However you want to get involved in the community, that is the best place for you to go. Flipscreen.games. That's the website. So we thank you for tuning in to another episode of Nintendo Noise. Let's get back to it. So, Steve, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, official trailer number 3 is here. A few days old at this point, but it's fresh on my mind anyway.
Yeah, how many
And
times have you watched it at this point?
3,
Yeah, I think I'm the same. Yeah.
3, yeah, 3,
I pretty
3 or
much
4.
immediately watched it again. I was like, "Hold on, I need to process some of the bits
Yeah,
that happened there." I was like,
watched
"What's
it
going on in the
again.
background there?"
So yeah, you know what, it was 4 times because I watched it twice and then I watched it again with friends and then I watched it before we sat down today so I could get it fresh on my mind again. Um this was an exciting look, I think, at it because obviously this game, is one we've all been looking forward to quite a bit. It's a game that, I think a lot of people rightly are thinking is going to be a game of the year contender, right? Like it's got a lot of attention on it. And I think despite all that attention and all that buzz, we haven't really seen that much of it. They've been playing their cards pretty close to their chest. And I thought
I know.
this felt like the most really substantial look at it that we've gotten.
This was the first time that I, really got hyped for it, understood what the concept and the story potentially was, and we spoke about it a little bit on the Flip Screen Games podcast this week. I can't remember what the context was and what game Max was talking about, how he kinda needed to see more or something, and we were just like, "No, no way, like, you
Starfield,
can."
I
There
think it
are just
was.
some Yeah, there are just some games that you were just sold on anyway. If the sequel to Breath of the Wild is now in development, I was sold on it there and then. They could have just not shown me any more, and I
Yeah,
would have
don't
bought the
show me a
game
single
anyway.
frame of it. Just put the game out.
Yeah, and I would have bought it, but when I heard the music, when I saw this trailer, when, like, everything kind of gelled, that in combination with what they'd shown us with his new skills and, like, the new puzzles out in the open world, the fact that there's seemingly no shrines and there's, like, return to proper dungeons, all of it seemed so exciting to me, and I pre-ordered the game after I watched this trailer because up until this point, I
Yeah,
was
I'm
just
about
like
to go do that.
I hadn't ordered it, and I was just like, "You know what? I need this now. I'm ready for it.
I'm gonna
I'm so
go
excited about this game."
I'm gonna go pre-order 2 copies of it for me and my wife, and then I'm gonna get my Advance Wars pre-order in at the same time. Like I'm ready to rock here, man.
Yeah, I know. Like oh god, just everything about it just looks so good. Seeing the skills in action. There's like this scene where there's like a section where it looks like something from Mission Impossible, and he's like going down through these
The
lasers, and I was
lasers
like,
and
"Oh
everything. I was like,
shit,
what the hell
it's
is
gonna be
this? This
so
is so
cool."
cool.
Yeah, there was like that dude with like the orange face, and he's just like it's just like this fucking I don't even know who it was. Was it Ganon? I don't think it was Ganon. and he's just like got this like bright orange, like fiery face, and he like turns and he like
Yeah.
talks, and like
No, that's
oh, it
Ganon.
was so good. Really? Like like 1 minute into the video, I don't think it was like
Oh,
Ganon.
oh, 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 oh! I thought you were talking about the end. 1 minute into the video. Let me see. We'll jump around
Yeah,
here a
it's
little
like
bit.
one
I'm
minute
showing it
into
to
the
the
video,
YouTube people.
and it's like this oh, I think it was Ganon because you just see the back of his hair, and then he goes to turn around, and you don't actually see him. It was really cool. I was like, "Oh, yeah. This is awesome."
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much here, even like to try to take away.
Yeah, the, like,
Like,
flying ship thing, like, what was that as well? Like,
and like the
there's so
rocket
much.
arm thing that he pulled out, and he like rocketed himself up, and like like
Yeah,
all that kind of
what I'm
wacky
wondering is that
stuff.
one of
And
the, like, creations that you can make with
I'm yeah, I'm
like,
thinking
Ultra
so.
Hand and
Yeah.
the fuse and all of that stuff? Like, oh,
And
so
it's like
cool.
that is so interesting because it's like there's so many what look like new abilities that we saw here. It's like I get the impression that none of the old abilities are going to return, and like maybe they will, and you'll just have like a million ways you can interact with the environment. But like that's even weird, because it's like okay, so like what happens when I need to do those things I did in the previous game? Is it like am I making items? Am I doing the fusions to replace them and stuff? That all seems very interesting. I'm very interested also like with the landscapes and how different they look. Like I like not much or any of what we see looks familiar to me, even though I know it's in the same world at least part
Well,
way.
I think, like, chunks of the land are up in the sky. Like, that's my theory.
Right.
It's like these were pieces that were on the land and potentially is landscape that we knew from Breath of the Wild, and they've now suddenly gone up in the air.
And
And
now it's
so
all
it's
different.
revealed new things underneath, and so everything's all different. And
Yeah.
it looks a lot different. Like there's new areas we've never been to before. Like there's that section where he's like battling on these two mine carts and like Link's like going at
Yeah. I was
someone on
like, what the hell
another
is
mine
that?
cart.
He's
I was
like
like,
poking
"Wow,
him with a
what is
spear.
this?" Yeah. Which
And
I
it,
think that's like one of the dungeons. I think it's probably one of the dungeon battles where you're actually in a proper dungeon again, which I
I,
know was
and
one of the big complaints that people had from Breath of the Wild.
I'm very interested in that too because it's like, are they really proper dungeons? Like, are you know what I mean? And like, if they are, how does that work? Like, are they progression oriented? Are they not? Like,
Well, yeah, because 'cause I'm really curious because that the shrines were the way you progressed in the game. It's how you got improved stamina or improved health. You got those orbs from the shrines, and you took them, and you, like, then took them to the shrines, and you, like, prayed with them, right? And then you could increase your stamina or you could increase your life. Like, how's that all gonna work? There's still so many unanswered questions, but I think they showed enough for me to get super excited about
just
it.
wet your beak, you know?
And just, like, get me super hyped up for it, though there's so much in there that you can break down if you want to, and
I
seemingly a really ambitious story, unlike Breath of the Wild, which I didn't really care about, to be honest.
yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about some of that stuff. Because like I think the story in Breath of the Wild is like very surface level, right? Like it's literally like it's the same story as like the original one. It's like, oh yeah, Zelda's captured, go save her. Okay, like that's the story. This
Oh, you
feels
mean like every
so
Mario game?
Sure. This feels so much more oriented around the story, right? Between like it seems very clear now that Zelda doesn't die, but she gets captured, right? Like you get separated when she falls down that hole, and I'm guessing she gets captured by Ganon and is being held as like a prisoner in his castle or whatever, right? Like that's she makes a comment about him needing to find her. She's in this different outfit. There looked like a scene where she was talking to Ganon and she had like a tear going down her face, like things like that. Um, they
Yeah,
make a
she had that thing in
mention.
her hand which looked like tear-shaped as well, and I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it was like some kinda like gold,
Yeah.
medallion or something. They also made, there's like a bit of dialogue where they're talking about, "Oh, we're counting on your knight and his sword," and I'm like, "Okay, so do we start with the master sword then
I
from the
don't think
jump?" Like
I could see us maybe starting with it, and then somehow Link loses it or loses his powers or something changes because
yeah.
there's still that like Breath of the Wild tunic, like blue. We see him, and then he like changes to have like the tribal tattoo that we've seen in the other trailers. So it really feels like there's two different Links at one point. And but we hear like them saying that Link's our last line of defense, right? And he's the only one that
Yeah.
can kind of save Zelda, and presumably the only one that can save Zelda. We don't know if that's the goal of the game.
Seems
I
like
think
it
you're
though.
probably on the money though. That seems like what it is. Yeah.
Well, and also, there's the other thing that I thought was interesting is like they show moments of you exploring with a character, like as a companion. Like there's a bit where they show him fighting with Sidon, the prince of the Zoras from
Zora. Yeah.
yeah, and he's there like backing you up in a fight. And then
I
they
don't know
showed
if you were
him
exploring with him or if it is just like I'm in the dungeon with him, which is what I
either
presumed.
way. Either
Yeah.
way, I mean, like there seems like there's going to be sections of the game where like you're working with with another protagonist because there was another moment too where they show him and there's like a
There's like a whole
Rito.
crew together, right? And like they're
That
all there.
too. Yeah, yeah, he's with a bunch of people, and there's like a scene where he's like pulling a cart with his horse. There's a scene where there's like a what looks like I think like a younger like a Rito girl is like helping him, like he's like jumping on a like air thing to get lift, and she's like right behind him. So it's like that is interesting. Is like how's that going to play out? Are those things like section based? Are they are there like moments in the overworld where you'll get to do things like
Or
that?
is there like a party system where if I do quests for these people and I help them out, that then they choose to come with me? And is it gonna be at the end when we go to Ganon, you know, how you had the divine beasts, where the more you had, the easier it was. Maybe it's the more of these like quests that you do, and the more people you help, the more people you can bring along to help you in the fight. Because
Yeah.
that's the vibe I was getting. It looked like when they're all stood there on the landscape, Link's in his like Breath of the Wild tunic, getting ready to go. He's got one, two, three, four, five, six, seven people around him. So it kind of just makes sense that right, we're prepped and ready for something.
Yeah, and like maybe there's like a war storyline or something. Like I don't know, but very interesting. Um, Something I don't know if you caught this, but like it gave me goosebumps the first time is there's that the remix of the OG theme, which we
Oh
haven't
yeah,
hasn't
when
been
it yeah.
used,
Did you
hasn't
see
been
that
used in a
they
mainline game in a really long time.
yeah, Nintendo put it up on the Japanese website. Someone extracted it and posted it over on Twitter, and like I just keep listening to it. It's so good. It's so good. The music in this game feels like a step up from Breath of the Wild.
Couple other things too. I've seen now multiple shots of the Rito girl. I also saw it's not Urabosa because Urabosa was the champion who is gone like from 100 years ago. But remember, there was like the young girl who was like the leader of
Oh,
the
she helps you
Gerudo.
get in, doesn't she? Like when you're there and you're in the desert, and she's like helping you get in.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
her?
yeah. And there's a shot of what I think is her older, like 5 couple years older or whatever, and it looks like she's doing like an electric attack and like backing you up. And then there's another scene where it's her and Sidon and they're like running with you. That also kind of has like a big battle, like war kind of energy. Like maybe you have to like get all these people to back you up and you go storm the castle at the end to rescue Zelda, like something like that. I don't know. I could also see Zelda being a playable like companion, like when you beat the game and then you go and do like all the post game stuff. Maybe then you can have her with you, like you had Sidon or whoever earlier on. Like I don't know, there's a lot there, man. There's a lot there.
I know, and like part of me wants to go and unpick it and watch all these theory videos on YouTube because there are tons of them already. But part of me just wants to go in and just be like, you know what? I kind of want to experience it all
I
myself
just want to go in
and just like
fresh.
figure it all out and because I feel like I've seen enough. Like I'd seen enough prior to the 10 minutes. I'd seen enough prior to that. Every single time they show me more, I'm just like, yeah, I've already seen enough. And then I somehow get even more hyped for the game. I'm very
Yeah.
excited about it.
I'm with you. I'm with you there, man. Because that's the thing is like my baseline hype has been like it's like yeah, it's like a fucking 9, it's a 10, whatever. It's like this is gonna be one of the best games I've ever played. Of course, I'm excited for it. But now that it's like, oh, this is like a month away now. Like this is like
Yeah, it's
it's
like
here.
3 weeks at this point, right?
Yeah, man. It's fucking awesome.
Crazy.
That's like so
It's
exciting.
crept up.
Um, so then the only other stuff I wanted to call out is there's a couple enemy types and stuff that they showed off that were like definitely reminiscent of old enemies. Like I know we called out in one of the OG trailers, there's that three-headed dragon that you could see when they were panning over the open world. They showed like the one like the combat with it this time. It's like very clearly reminiscent of the monster from the original NES title. I forget what it's called, but um, I'm wondering if there might not be other things like that in this game where there's like the ability to kind of like make some references to some of these older characters,
That would
you
be
know,
really
and
cool if they did that because I feel like people felt that Breath of the Wild left a lot of old Zelda behind. It, like, cut ties with tons of stuff. Like, yeah, we
yeah.
did have, you know, bokoblins and the choo-choos and those kind of enemies that we knew, but there wasn't a lot that felt similar to other Zelda games. It feels like maybe this is them bringing some of those elements back in with those, like, references to other enemies from the older games and back to,
Gleeok.
traditional dungeons.
Gleeok is the name of the dragon that I was
You
thinking
think
of.
it's the same one?
I do. Or at least it's the same type of monster. Because like
Yeah.
there was also a Gleeok in I wanna say it's in Wind Waker, but there's definitely one in a later game. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
You know,
I'm
the
I'm
one
very,
that
very confident that that's what it is.
it feels like the enemies are gonna be very different in this game, like, they can adapt and use the fuse techniques that you know as well, like, we've seen them in that presentation with the 10-minute of gameplay where there was, like, that character that was, like, holding a door. There's no guardians from what we've seen so far, that enemy type is completely gone, so I would imagine some of the and I've not seen them demonstrate the parry or the flurry rush or any of that stuff. We don't know if that's in the game,
And
anymore, it might not be.
some of that stuff is interesting because it's like, are we not seeing those things because it's like we don't want to show you old stuff, or is it because they don't exist? And like that,
Yeah.
I think is a really important question. Um, and it's like not that it'll like make the game materially better or worse necessarily, but like if all your old powers are just gone, right? Like if a bunch of the old enemy types are just gone, it's gonna go a long way in making this game feel decidedly different than Breath of the Wild, which I think was a big concern for a lot of people. And I know we talked about that is like, does this game and we we can pin this part of the conversation here even if we want and bin it off after this, but like can this game live up to the hype? It's like, is this game at risk of being a sophomore slump, right, of coming out and being like a sequel to one of the best games of all time, one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, best-selling game in the franchise, one of the best-selling games on the hardware, like all those things that creates such a level of pressure and expectation, and like can this game live up to it? My knee jerk reaction is yes.
Mhm.
Um, which I'm very, the fact that I feel that way makes me feel really good because I imagine that whatever they've shown us is like the tip of the iceberg, right? Like they haven't
Oh,
shown
yeah,
us the
yeah, they
coolest shit
don't
in this
reveal
game yet.
anything. Yeah.
No, we know nothing. And the fact that it already seems that cool and that different and that unique and that fresh is like, yeah, man. I mean, we might about like if Breath of the Wild was the best game of all time, it might just about to be dethroned and become the second best game of all time, which would certainly be something.
Oh, that'd be crazy. And I think this is firmly in contention for game of the year if that's the case, and wipes out anything else that we're gonna see this year. Um,
It seems
I
that way, right? Like if
It
this game
really
hits,
does, yeah.
it's like, can anything really live up to it? And I honestly think the only game that can is Starfield. If Starfield is
I don't know,
as good,
Diablo 4, Baldur's Gate 3 are coming out as well. They're pretty big titles.
I think those are great games. They're big games. They could be nominated. I don't think they can win. If that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
kind
Not
of
not
agree.
everybody is gonna play a Diablo. Not everybody is gonna play a Baldur's Gate. Everybody's gonna play Tears of the Kingdom. Everybody's gonna play Starfield. It seems like Tears of the Kingdom is going to live up to expectations. If Starfield lives up to expectations, it might be a generation genre defining game. And I think it could get more attention because that type of game has not had a generation genre defining game since what? The Witcher 3?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I don't know. I
Right?
think
Like,
Horizon and like that took that open world
that's the thing.
formula and
I love
ran with it.
Horizon. I love Ghost of Tsushima, right? But like, do people think of those games as being like if you were like, what are the
I
best, most
think I
influential open world games of Skyrim,
I think
Fallout, like
Elden Ring is in that list. I really
Elden? No,
do.
you're right. You're definitely right. Elden Ring is the most recent one. I think
Yeah,
before Elden Ring, it was probably Witcher 3, in
yeah.
terms of like cultural moment for that type of game, right? If this game can if Starfield can come out and match that, I think that is the only thing that can really, really give Tears of the Kingdom a run for its money. Because if that game comes out and it's as good as like Fallout 3 was when it came out, or Skyrim was when it came out, and it's like, holy shit, like this is revolutionary. This is the next step. This is everything we wanted it to be. That's
You don't
that's
think
it though, man.
something you don't think that something like Spider-Man 2 has a shot at taking it
I
down
don't.
though? Because
I don't.
especially considering you look at last year and it was the argument that you made, right, was, well, the Game Awards often wants to focus on stuff that's like more story centric, that like evokes emotion, and obviously an open world game is going to struggle to do that in the same way that something with more of a narrative would. And Spider-Man seemed to have that really good story attached to a seemingly great open world game.
You're right. I think the thing that Spider-Man's gonna run into though is like, and again, right? You look at Spider-Man's reception. It's got an 87 on Metacritic, right? Like that's very good. That's extremely respectable. But it's not Breath of the Wild. You know,
No,
it's
I
it's
know.
not it's not Elden Ring, right? And like I as a Spider-Man fan, like I love that game that much. I think a lot of people really fuck with those games and think that they're great, but I also don't think that I think you'd be hard pressed to find many fans that would argue that it is on the same caliber of even Sony's like S tier franchises, right? I don't think it's on the same level as like a God of War or a Last of Us necessarily. And I don't know. Like, what is the reason of that? Is that because it's connected to an established IP, so people treat it a little differently? Is it because it's Spider-Man, so it's like a little bit lighter? It is like it's not trying to be God of War. It's not trying to make you cry, right? It's trying to be a really fun representative adaptation of a beloved character, which is a different set of goals. And I'm not saying that that's lesser or anything. It's just like I don't know that people give it the same critical flowers that they do something that is like, you know, uh, I guess on that upper echelon. And I think the other thing that Spider-Man has going against it is it could also run into a sophomore slump situation where you're like, hey, this game is amazing and it's just it's Spider-Man, but it's again and it's better and it's bigger and
Yeah,
there's
but
more.
it's set in the
And
same space as well. Like, how do you modify New York City in the same way that you can modify Hyrule by shoving things up in the
right.
sky and like bringing in new enemies and new
And
monsters and
it's like
changing the landscape?
who's to say they could expand the map? There are parts of the city you couldn't go to in the original. They could have you go to another locale for part of the game. Like there are things they can do, right? There are cards yet to play. And as a Spider-Man fan, right? Like I'm very excited about Venom being in the game. I'm very excited about the symbiote getting worked in. I'm very excited about the idea of seeing, characters like Craven the Hunter, but like I don't know, right? Like it's like that game. I think if you ask anybody, they'd be like, "That's the best Spider-Man game ever made." How do you top that? How do you just do? How do it's you just have to make the same thing but better? And like I think they can do that. Insomniac is an incredibly talented studio. I think Miles Morales learned a lot of really important lessons from 2018 and was overall a tighter product. So like, do I think this game will be better? Yeah, for sure. But like, I don't know that it's gonna get critical reception and flowers the way that it needs to be able to beat out the sequel to Breath of the Wild and the next big true AAA open world game from Bethesda. Like
I know.
I don't know. I think if anything, it's far more likely to run into the scenario that like Horizon did in 2017, where it's like, yeah, Horizon was a great game, but it was everybody's third choice, right? At best. And it's like, okay, like that's great. That's good. I think it'll win a ton of awards. I don't think it'll win Game of the Year. I think for me, Game of the Year comes down to Zelda or Starfield. And if there's a single other game in serious contention, I will be surprised because it'll either mean that one of those two games didn't live up to expectations or that another game greatly exceeded our expectations. And
I really hope Diablo 4 is that game because I had such a good time with it, and they've changed so much in that. I think it can appeal to a lot more people, and I hope more people do check it out. But
I
I think
feel
you're right.
very
I actually
confident that that
think
gets
it's Tears of the
multiplayer
Kingdom.
game of the year. I think it wins multiplayer and it gets nominated for game of the year
Oh, it
maybe,
could
but it
also,
doesn't win.
yeah, I was gonna say it could get action, but it's not going to because that's gonna go to Zelda.
Or Spider-Man. Because
Yeah,
Spider-Man
right.
could
So
win that as a
it's tough.
consolation prize, right? Of like,
Yeah.
okay, well, Zelda's game of the year, Starfield's best RPG. We'll give Spider-Man best action game.
I know, it's really tough.
I
Gonna
mean,
be interesting. We've got like 2 weeks until we see, previews for Tears of the Kingdom, presumably. So I'm interested to see what people who get hands on with this game say. I don't think it's gonna sway my decision either
I
way.
think people are already
I'm very
playing it.
excited for it.
Actually, I think people already have it.
I
I've
think people do, but they're not gonna be able to talk about it until the
no,
week before it's released.
no, no, no. But I've heard multiple people, like on podcasts that I listen to, where they're like, "Oh, I'm playing a redacted game, and I can't believe how early we got the code." And I'm like, "That's got to be Tears of the Kingdom, right? What else is it?
Dreadful.
Maybe? Or, I don't know. Maybe." I wouldn't be surprised if Zelda already has codes out because they're that confident that it's that good and it's that long that you need that much time to
That's my
play it.
guess, yeah. That's my guess, is they want people to have these 10 out of 10 reviews so that
Yeah.
people are just like, "Okay, shit, yeah, I need to go
And
buy
it's
it."
like, Nintendo's not stupid when it comes to that. Like, they know when they have a fucking banger, right? Like, I'm sure they're
Mm.
confident that this game is
Yeah,
the
like
next
one
coming
two
of
Switch,
Christ.
they knew it was phenomenal, so they
So they
decided to
put it
make a
out.
sequel to it.
I don't know. I'm with you. Where like I was excited before, but now I'm like, oh, let's fucking go, baby. Like it's here. It is imminent. And it's crazy to me that a month from now we will be in the throes of it. Like that we'll be playing this fucking game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Crazy.
can't wait.
Crazy. So, if you guys want to write in and let us know what you think about Tears of the Kingdom's latest trailer or any of the stuff we saw at today's Nintendo Indie World presentation, make sure you write into us. Questions at flipscreen.games. Come join the Discord where the conversation keeps rolling between episodes. However, you want to get involved, however, you want to write in or become part of the show, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can become a Patreon supporter. You can find links to all the places we are all over the web. It's the easiest one-stop shop for you to get involved in the community and show your support. However, you choose to do that. Thanks for tuning in for another show. Thanks for sticking around to the end. We greatly appreciate it. So, for the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week, gamers.